Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I will be giving you the top 10 Warhammer 40k armies of July 2019. So for those of you who are new to these top 10 videos, I take the top 5 placings from all GT and major tournaments that were featured on the Best Coast Pairings app, and the armies that had more placings get a higher spot on the list. Also, because in competitive 40k some armies like to mix and match, for example, some army lists have Blood Angels and Astra Military in their lists, I determine the primary faction of the army by which faction had the most points spent on it. So for example, if a list had 1500 points of Blood Angels and 500 points of Astra Militarum, then I would consider that list to be a Blood Angels army. Also, like usual, I will be showing all of the army lists that top these events, but it won't be showing duplicates because some of these lists topped multiple events. So I will only be showing each list once to avoid redundancy. So with that exposition out of the way, let's get into what you guys and gals came here for, and that is the top 10 armies of July. Number 10. Jeanstealer Calls. The Tyranid wannabes had 4 top 5 placings during the month of July, which puts them in the 10th spot of this list. Their lists are slightly different this time around though, and that's because none of them are actually including aberrants. 10-man Acolyte squads with Rocksaws and 20-man squads with all Ham Flamers, and Atlan Jackals seem to be the go-to for the army now. And of course, all the normal support characters we've been seeing in past lists. Tyranid allies or Tank Commander Brood Brothers seem to be the replacement for the aberrants. The Tank Commanders help this army out a lot since they give some long-range firepower to help deal with backline threats that sometimes take a while to get to with the rest of the army, since they usually have to chew through the enemy screen first. And the Nids bring some extra psychic shenanigans along some cheap command points with the Ripper Swarms. Personally, I feel like this army has the potential to be a top 5 army, and if this were a tier list, I'd have them much higher, since the tools they have at their disposal are amazing for a player who knows how to use them. The army has a high skill floor and a high skill ceiling, which means they can be difficult for a new player to pilot, but incredibly strong in the hands of a pro that knows what they are doing. Number 9. Astra Militarum. The regular Joes come in at number 9 this month with 5 top 5 placings in the month of July, with their placings being slightly better than the Jeanstealer Cult to beat them out in the tiebreaker. The new hotness is the Tank Commanders, and they are doing extremely well right now. And it's not because they got buffed. It's because the Castellan Knight isn't on every table in competitive games anymore, which means people can actually play with tanks again. Cadia and Catachan are the 2 go-to regiments, which isn't really anything new. Cadia works really well right now because they are a great counter to Chaos with the Relic of Lost Cadia, alongside just having a good amount of DACA with stuff like Pask and more tank commanders. So technically Cadia can actually play with 4 tank commanders. And Catachan has super efficient artillery because of their trait that lets them re-roll random number of shots, and also their beefy boy infantry that are strength 4 and have really cool combos with the Ministorum Priest and Strachan. Also, Bolgren work really well in Catachan too, not necessarily because they get buffed up by the Catachan trait or anything like that, but because you normally bring a Ministorum Priest in Catachan as well, and that Ministorum Priest can work with the Bolgren to give them +1 attack to make them hit like trucks. Astra Militarum also have some strong formations to help contribute to their success, those being the Emperor's Fist formation for the Leman Russes and the Emperor's Wrath for the artillery. Also, the Emperor's Blade formation makes its way into this top 10 as well, thanks to Mr. Brandon Grant. His list is the one that actually uses 3 Chimeras, which are basically his replacement for Hellhounds, but they can also transport infantry. They're also less of a liability than Hellhounds because they don't explode on a 4+, meaning you don't have to be scared having units near them in your own deployment. And they are cheaper than the Hellhounds as well, but do pretty much the same job. You can use them to screen in Catachan armies because even if the enemy wraps one of them up in combat, you can just send in your beefy boys to go punch that unit to death and free up your Chimera. And with the Emperor's Blade formation, when an infantry unit is charged, you can pick an Emperor's Blade Chimera to overwatch alongside that infantry for 1 command point. This works really well with the Flamers on the Chimera and can actually catch a lot of people off guard, since they are now charging into 2 heavy Flamers that auto-hit and can re-roll the number of shots because of Catachan. Overall, I'm liking these cool combos people are coming up with, and also the fact that we are seeing tanks in guard again, since the Leman Russ is such an iconic unit for the army. Number 8. Adeptus Mechanicus. The Wallies are back this month with 5 top 5 finishes during the month of July. The new Scorpius Disintegrator seems to be a staple now in top AdMech lists, and I can honestly see why. They have a missile launcher that shoots D6 shots at strength 7, -2 AP and D3 damage, and their main cannon, which is 3 shots at strength 8 with -3 AP and 3 flat damage. It can move and shoot those heavy weapons without penalty, has 12 wounds at toughness 7, and it's only 116 points. That's not all though, this bad boy can also get +2 to shoot because of the stratagem Protector Doctrina Imperative, which means it hits Alatok flyers at normal ballistic skill since it cancels out the -2 from shooting that flyer. Combine this with Call standing beside all 3, and this means that these little tanks of destruction are actually incredibly good in the current flyer spam meta. They are also incredibly cheap for what they bring to the table, so all around they are pretty much staples in AdMech right now. As for the other units in the list, there are a lot of the normal stuff like Rangers, Tech Priests, Termite Drills, Doom Crawlers, and a lot of Cataphren Breachers using the Servitor Maniple formation that can give them +1 to hit and also a 5+ invul with stratagems. Number 7. Chaos Demons and Necrons. So that's right, we have a tie this time around. Both armies had 5 placings during the month of July, and they had very similar placings, so the tiebreakers don't really matter. So first off, I'm going to go over the Chaos list, and then I will move on to the Necrons list. So for Chaos Demons, their lists this time around are pretty much what we've been seeing out of Chaos Demons for a while now. They are all Jim Vessel or TJ Lanigan style lists. In fact, 2 of these lists are actually played by Jim Vessel and TJ Lanigan. The list revolves around protecting a bunch of good characters with durable Plague Bearers that can be -2 to hit in shooting and in close combat, and can increase their invulnerable save to 4+ with a stratagem. While stuff like Bloodletters or Pink Horrors or Blightlord Terminators deep strike in to clear the enemy chaff to make way for juicy smite and charge targets for the Thousand Suns and Chaos characters. We are seeing some new additions to this army though. With some Obliterators in one of the lists, they can deep strike in and blow up a tank or 2 if they get lucky, because of the Veterans of the Long War plus Endless Cacophony combo, and Contemptor Dreadnoughts with C-Beam cannons. The list with the 3 Dreads with the C-Beam cannons is Jim Vessel's new list if I'm not mistaken, and I assume he must have thought to himself, what's better than a Contemptor with C-Beam cannons? 3 Contemptors with C-Beam cannons, and thus the new list was born. I have no proof that this was his thought process, I just thought it was funny. Overall though, I'm glad that Chaos Demons are still doing well in competitive play, even if they are just pawns of the army while the Heretic Astartes do all the heavy lifting. And now for the Necrons. It would seem as though Necrons are now back from the dead, and they are now consistently making top 10s again. 3 Doomsday Arcs, 3 Doom Scythes are still a staple in competitive Necrons, but this time around we actually got a bit more variety in these lists, which I like to see. One list brought a Satan, or Catan, or Cetan, or whatever the hell you want to call it. Another list brought some Destroyers, another list brought Lichguard, all of which are great wait, did I say Lichguard? Kudos to the guy that brought Lichguard, and still did well. Not only because he did it with Lichguard in his list, but also because he doesn't have a single Doomsday Arc or Doom Scythe in his list. I love seeing lists like this because it really changes how we look at competitive and what we deem viable. So again, kudos to this guy for doing it. Other than that though, the rest of the lists are pretty standard for the most part. Doomsday Arcs hit like trucks while being decently durable because of quantum shielding, Doom Scythes dump out a ton of mortal wounds while doing their best Thousand Suns impersonation, and Tomb Blades are pretty fast, which makes them great objective grabbers while also putting out a decent amount of damage. Overall, I'm happy to see Necrons in the top since they are a pretty cool army. But to be honest, I'm kinda disappointed the Reanimation Protocol, which is Necron's real identity, is more of an afterthought in these lists. It's kind of unfortunate, but hey, at least Necrons are winning something, unlike Grey Knights. Number 6. Tau Empire. Insert anime about mech suits comes in at number 6 this month with 6 top 5 placings during the month of July. So just like expected, all of these lists have 3 Riptides and spam drones to protect the Wait, what? There's a list this time around without 3 Riptides plus drones? Nani? That's right, Tau is starting to branch out and do things other than Triptide plus drones. Although, to be honest, half of these lists are still Triptides plus drones. Some of the other units being used now, though, are Broadsides and Ghost Kills, which usually go in the Triptide list since they are also suits that can benefit from the broken, incredibly strong mechanic of drones taking shots for the suits. And the other lists are Vehicle Spam, with Long Strike and Hammerheads, and spamming a ton of Seeker Missiles. The Seeker Missiles can actually be good because of Marker Lights, because in case you didn't know, there are more purposes for Marker Lights other than rerolling ones and getting +1 to hit. With only 2 Marker Lights on a target, you can actually shoot Seeker Missiles at that target at normal ballistic skill. So instead of dumping all your Marker Lights on the one target, you can spread them out a bit more and get some use out of those cheap Seeker Missiles. And boy, does this list bring a lot of Seeker Missiles and Marker Lights. Overall though, I'm glad we are seeing Tau branch out a bit and not just doing Triptide plus drones, even though to be honest, if I were to play Tau, I'd do Triptides plus drones, because the drones eating wounds for the suits mechanic is broken, incredibly strong. Number 5. Drukhari. The Dark Elves come in number 5 this month with 6 top 5 placings during the month of July, with their placings being better than Tau to beat them out on the tiebreaker. This time around, the list looks to be mostly Coven based, except for one list that looks like Venom Spam plus Fire Spam. Talos and Grotesques are pretty damn strong, and they are stupidly durable with their 4+ invulnerable saves because of being Prophets of Flesh, which is by far the best Coven to use. To be honest, I'm starting to think that the other Covens need to be changed or buffed in order to compete with Prophets of Flesh. I don't think Prophets of Flesh needs to be nerfed, I just think it would be nice if we saw other Covens in competitive play, because as of right now, Prophets of Flesh is the only one being played. For Cabals, we at least have Blackheart, Obsidian Rose, and Flayed Skull that sees competitive play, and for Witches, we've seen all 3 cults at one point or another. but Prophets of Flesh seems to be too good to not take, which is unfortunate in my opinion. But anyways, the army can be incredibly durable with Coven units, and even the vehicles can be surprisingly durable with their 5+ invulnerable saves. The entire army is incredibly fast as well, so it's great for board control. And pretty much everything in the army hits like a truck except for poison shots, but even then, a million poison shots can do a ton of damage if rolls go their way. The current staples for the army seem to be Talos, Grotesques, Ravagers, Flyers, and Venoms with Cabalites. Overall, I'm happy that my beloved Drukhari are still making top 10s, even if it's not pure Cabalite forces, which is the way that I enjoy playing the army. Number 4. Adeptus Custodes. The army that's so blinged out it would make most rappers jealous comes in 4th this month with 7 top 5 placings during the month of July. So a few of these lists are pretty much just Imperial soup, but because of the way I classify these lists, they are Custodian lists due to having more points spent on the Custodian stuff, which is pretty much just the Caladius Grav tanks, plus a Vexilla, and Trajan or his twin from Forge World. As for the regular looking Custodian list though, the units mostly used are the ones mentioned previously, plus the Custodian Guard, the Jet Bikes, the Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle Jet Bike, Palace Grav tanks, and the Telemon Heavy Dreadnought. All of these units are incredibly durable and also hit incredibly hard, especially the Caladius. That thing pretty much shoots 8 power fists that hit on 2s. And that's only one of its weapons. The bikes are incredibly fast and come with a million bolter shots that are amazing at clearing chaff infantry so that they can clear the way for better charge targets. The Vexilla also makes most of the army -1 to hit, which adds to their already durable stat lines. And the army itself is pretty much the only elite army in the meta right now other than Imperial Knights. This army is pretty much exactly what Grey Knights wish they could be. Man, I miss playing my Grey Knights. Now before we get into the top 3 armies of July, let's go over some honorable mentions. These armies had at least one top 5 placing during the month of July, but didn't get onto the list due to not enough placings or losing out in a tiebreaker to one of the armies that did make it onto the list. So this month we have Vanilla Space Marines with 2 placings, Vanilla Chaos Space Marines with 4 placings, Death Watch with 1 placing, Space Wolves with 1 placing, Sisters of Battle with 1 placing, and Chaos Knights with 1 placing. I think it's interesting that Vanilla Space Marines are getting a huge update, which is supposed to bring them up to speed with the rest of the meta. So depending on how good this update is, we might be seeing a new top tier army very soon that dominates these top 10s for a while. I also find it interesting that Chaos Knights only have 1 placing, since I do think they are on par with Imperial Knights. But the one difference between them and Imperial Knights is the allies that they can bring to the table. And with Imperial Knights, they have allies that synergize with them just so much better than the Chaos Knights do. That ally would be the Imperial Guard. I could talk more about this, to be honest, it could be a whole video on its own. But because this is just an honorable mention, I'll leave that topic for another day. And now with the honorable mentions out of the way, but before we get into the top 3 armies of July, I have to mention to check out the channel's current sponsor, Bearbox Studios. Bearbox Studios is a painting commission studio that does a phenomenal job at painting miniatures. I personally had him paint up a bunch of stuff for me, and I couldn't be happier with how they turned out. He has great prices and does a great job. So if you have some gray minis that have been gray forever because you're just too lazy to paint, or you just want to get some really nicely painted miniatures, then send him a message through Facebook and he can hook you up. Let him know that Brady from Almost Pro Gaming sent you, and he'll be glad to help you out. For those that are interested in his services, I will have a link to his Facebook in the description. And now, the top 3 armies of July. Number 3, Orcs. The Mushroom Men come in 3rd this month with 9 top 5 placings during the month of July. The theme this time around seems to be mech guns, since a lot of these lists use them. Tractor cannons have been seeing some more play because I assume flyer spam, which Orcs sometimes have a hard time dealing with. And also smasher guns because of how cheap and spammable they are, while still putting out some decent damage. And I mean, they are pretty cheap. You can bring multiple in one unit and really spam these things. Other than that though, all these lists stick to the tried and true 3 units of maxed out boys or more, plus support characters, and then include other things like the Ludastar, Shock Attack Guns, Mega Knobs, Tank Bustas, Grots, and even some Daka Jets, and one list has a Morkanite. Like I've been saying for a while and in most of these top 10s, Orcs are pretty cool that way, because once you have the core of 3 units of max boys, plus some character support, you can pretty much do whatever you want with this army and still have a decent list to play with as long as you play it well. Personally, I play the army myself because it's really strong and looks like a lot of fun, but I don't feel like building and painting another 100+ model army, which is one of the downsides of the army in my opinion. And you have to build that core just because it's so good. You have a ton of stratagems that work well with those boys and the character support, like teleporting the boys across the table with the jump, or even advance and charging because of a war boss, or taking an almost dead unit of boys and bringing it back to full strength, or combining 2 squads of boys, or making a giant unit of boys attack twice. They have so many cool things that you can do with them. Overall though, I'm happy Orcs are still doing well, mainly because in 7th edition, they were actually like the butt of everyone's jokes, because Orcs were pretty much considered a joke army in 7th edition. So I'm very happy that they're doing well in 8th. Number 2, Craft Worlds. The cheese comes in second this month with 9 top 5 placings during July, with those placings being better than the Orcs for the tiebreaker. Flyer spam, and more flyer spam. To be fair though, I think Games Workshop will be nerfing the LA Talk trait soon due to how they changed the Raven Guard trait, which worked very similarly. Raven Guard's trait has been changed from -1 to hit to now always in cover, and if you're already in cover, you gain -1 to hit. So if Games Workshop does this to LA Talk as well, this means the flyers will no longer be a natural -2 to hit when they're outside of 12 inches. With that said, if that change goes through, I don't think that necessarily kills flyer spam. The flyers are still incredibly good for their points. They still come with good weaponry, they still do good damage, they can still zip around the board, they can still screen out your army against ground melee armies that can't fly. So even after that change, in my opinion, they'll still be really good. They were just a little over the top with the -2 to hit against a lot of armies. But still, -1 is still very good, and now you just throw them in Ulthway instead of a Laytalk to give them a 6+ feel no pain, and you're still in a pretty decent spot. We still see 3 Razorwings in Drukhari lists, and they're only -1 to hit naturally, so I don't think that change will necessarily kill flyer spam, and instead we'll just have a new variation of flyer spam. Most likely going back to 3 Drukhari Blackheart flyers alongside a couple of Crimson Hunter Exarchs so that you can get access to the Agents of X stratagem. And you'll have a bunch of flyers that are still at least -1 to hit and have a 6+ feel no pain. And also you can use a stratagem to increase one of them to be -2 to hit after your opponent targets it, kinda like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Trap card. To be honest, I actually don't mind flyer spam as much as I like to poke fun at it, and kind of like Imperial Knights, I actually think that this army keeps the meta interesting since people have to build their lists in a certain way in order to deal with it. So with that said, overall, I'm happy Craft Worlds are still on top because I do think that they are one of the strongest armies in the game. I've been saying it for a very long time. I just think Inari kind of like overshadowed them because Inari was even better with their broken rules. And yeah, again, I don't necessarily mind flyer spam. Number 1, the best army goes to Imperial Knights. That's right, Imperial Knights are still on top of the meta with 9 top 5 placings during the month of July, and those placings being better than flyer spam to beat them out with the tiebreaker. There isn't really much to say that I haven't said in previous videos, but I guess I'll go over it anyways. They are beefy boys, they hit like Mike Tyson on steroids, and they move faster than Usain Bolt on steroids. And they go really well with Imperial Guard. The Castellan also makes a comeback in a couple of these lists. It is still, in fact, a beast even at 700 points. It's just more balanced now, but still incredibly strong, especially if the player using it gets to go first and nuke the targets off the board that actually have a decent chance of wounding it. Crusaders are the next best knight as well. They do a decent amount of damage for a little over half of the cost of the Castellan. And Gallants are annoying as hell because they're really strong and fast, and once they get into your lines, they can do some stupid shenanigans like one-shotting stuff with the Death Grip stratagem. I remember when I one-shot my buddy's Gilliman with my Gallant using Death Grip, it was absolutely hilarious. Well, for me it was hilarious, for him it was infuriating. And like I was mentioning before when talking about Chaos Knights, Imperial Guard are perfect for allying with Imperial Knights since they cover all of their weaknesses. You can screen out Deep Strike area with all of the guardsmen to ward off those pesky Blood Angel Smash Captains if they're deep striking in. You can use cheap infantry to stand on objectives while the Knights go put in the heavy lifting. You can use Wyverns or Basilisks or Mortars to help deal with enemy infantry that are hiding inside of ruins that the Knights can't get to. And you can bring tank commanders to help blast stuff away alongside the Knights. On top of that, you can also use them as command point battery with Grand Strategist, which also gives you a free reroll which can come in handy. And they give more command points to the army to spend on really strong stratagems like Rotate Ion Shields, Death Grip, Full Tilt, and much more. So those two factions definitely work well together. To be honest, it's probably the best combination of armies in the game in my opinion, other than maybe Chaos Demons and Thousand Suns. And that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button if you'd like to see more competitive Warhammer 40k content like this. And hit that subscribe button and that bell icon to be notified when I make more videos. I'd also like to take a moment to thank all of my current patrons, because without you guys and gals, the channel would not be where it's at today, so I really do appreciate you all and what you've done for me and my channel. And I'm glad you enjoy the channel enough to help support it, so thank you all from the bottom of my heart. And for you regular fans, if you find yourself coming back to my videos all the time and you want to help support the channel so I can expand and start making videos more often and also different types of content like battle reports, check me out on Patreon and consider making a pledge. I offer different services like exclusive access to the Almost Pro Gaming Discord server, personal coaching, and even custom list building, meaning I will make you a list so you don't have to worry about list building and can just have fun playing the game and improving your play. So check me out on Patreon if any of that interests you. I'll have a link for it in the description. Anyways, thanks again for watching my video, and I will see you all in the next one. Happy wargaming.